Alright, today what we're going to talk about is what an integer is. Now an integer, if you're gonna when you take notes on this, what you want to say is it is the set of positive and negative whole numbers. Okay, what does that mean? It means it is numbers such as -1, 0, 14, 1,000,000, 2,000, 4, -18. These are all examples of integers. Integers do not include numbers like fractions or decimals. So for instance, 1 and 1/2, that is not an integer because it has a fraction there. -0.24 is not an integer because it includes a decimal. Integers are usually represented on a number line. We can see that the positive integers are to the right of 0 because they are greater than 0, and the negative integers are to the left of 0 because they are smaller than 0. If you think about it, if you have 3 pieces of candy, you have more than 0 pieces of candy, right? However, if you said to your friend one day, "Hey, can I borrow some candy?" And you promise to pay them back, and your friend gives you 3 pieces of candy, what you really have are -3 pieces of candy because you still have to pay your friend back some candy. And if you think about it, you have less than 0 pieces of candy because even if you were to get some candy, you'd still have to give it away. Some other common examples of positive and negative numbers would be temperature. If you go somewhere where there's snow and it's really cold out, oftentimes you would be below 0 degrees. You might be at -5 degrees Celsius where there's lots of snow. However, when you're here in Venezuela, you are at about 22 degrees Celsius. If you look, the difference between these two numbers is not 22 degrees. The distance between here and here is 22 degrees. But the distance between a positive and a negative number in this example would be 27 degrees. There are many examples of negative numbers. See what you can come up with. As I mentioned before, a number line puts numbers in order from the least to greatest, the least being on the left and the greatest being on the right. It makes sense that 0 is less than 6. But what some people sometimes get confused about is the fact that -7 is actually less than -3. Think about it in terms of money. If you owe your friend 7 bolivars, you actually have less money than you would if you only owed your friend 3 bolivars. Many times you have to order or compare fractions. Remember, numbers that have a bigger absolute value, and we'll talk about that in a second. For instance, 7, the actual number of 7 that's negative is smaller than -7. So, if you are given a set of numbers that looks like this, we have 14, 0, -3, 8, and -7. You would order it from least to greatest. The smallest number is actually -7. You're 7 in the whole, so to order this from least to greatest, you would start with -7. Next would be -3. After that, and if you look on the number line, it works right here. After -3 would come 0, then 8, then 14. The next thing that I'm going to talk about, which I mentioned before, is something called absolute value. When you see a number written inside two lines like this, it is asking you to find the absolute value. The absolute value is the distance between this number and 0. Well, how many units away from 0 is the number 7? You would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the absolute value of 7 is 7 units. Sometimes you get the absolute value of a negative number, -4. Okay, find the absolute value of this. What you have to do is count the units between -4 and 0. So we would say 1, 2, 3, there are 4 units between 7 and -4. When it comes to absolute value, it is always positive. We would define absolute value as the number of units between your integer and 0. It is always a positive number. Move that in. So you would probably want to write that one down in your notes. Absolute value is the number of units between your integer and 0, and it is always a positive number. Now, when you look at the absolute value, if you had two numbers that were both negative, the one with the bigger absolute value is actually a smaller number. What in the world do I mean by that? Let's do an example. If I had the number -8 and -3 and I was asked to compare it, I would say, well, which one has the bigger absolute value? Which one of these negative numbers is further away from 0? Well, obviously, -8 right here is 8 units away from 0, and -3 right here is only 3 units away from 0. Since -8 has the bigger absolute value, it's further away from 0. -8 is bigger than -3. One more time, when we're comparing fractions, if it is negative, the farther to the left it is on the number line means it's smaller. What are opposites? This is the last concept we're going to talk about. Opposites are simply numbers that are equal distances on either side of the number line. For instance, what is the opposite of number 5? What is the opposite of number 5? Well, you look on the other side of the number line and you say, well, what is 5 units away from 0? Obviously, that would be -5. The opposite of a number always has the other sign. So if it's a negative number, the opposite will be positive. And if it is a positive number, the opposite will be negative. For instance, the opposite of -104 will be +104.